Okay, welcome to our channel. Once again, we're back on the episode of Brexit, Brexin. This video is being made in basically anticipation to the EU, Britain, or UK summit that is due on the 19th of May. That there is so much going on between the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the boss of the European Commission, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The whole thing about this Brexit, Brexin, is just the sheer amount of waste of limited economic resources in the past 10 years, i.e., with that Brexit vote on the 23rd of June 2016. We are now 2025 in May next year. It will be 10 years already. So we find ourselves basically somehow back in the EU. But just to say that this video that is being made here is my own opinion, the research that I've done myself. You can choose to agree or disagree with me, which is very fine. But the whole idea is to engage you in the conversation, to listen to what I have to say, and also to let me know your opinion in the comments. So the whole thing about this Brexit, as I've always advocated, that this 52-48% vote shouldn't have been, obviously the result of the referendum shouldn't have been the basis upon which this nation should have changed and basically activated Brexit. But as I always say, this channel is there for basically mainstream and also the not so mainstream. Sometimes I will say those that they would term what's the name again? This conspiracy theorist. Because what we found is that many a times alternative opinion are quickly branded as conspiracy theory, and therefore we don't actually listen to what other people have to say. So this channel is there for people to express their views, whatever they may be. We will listen to everyone, because through their conspiracies we may find some truth somewhere. And as I always say, if you want to know truth, or if you want to know that you are being told the truth, don't look at the words of politicians. Look at their actions. Look at what they are doing, and that will certainly give you an idea of what is really happening. Not reading too much into the conspiracy theory ideas during the COVID times, there was that thought that this whole Brexit thing was part of a big, some big plan, which also involved COVID somehow. So where you detach Britain from mainland Europe and then have that small area, or an area that is more like an island, to start them off with that COVID experiment and then extend it into Europe. So this is some of the views that has been expressed by conspiracy theorists. So then you see that when Boris Johnson eventually came and was given power, he said, let's get Brexit done. But in reality, when he came, he dealt with COVID. And we see the mess that went on with the PPE scandals, with the Partygate scandals, and a whole lot of a mess and a whole lot of waste. I am always concerned with waste, because we have a lot of problems domestically. People are really struggling to make ends meet. And in my opinion, the purpose of governance is basically to create a safety net, to come up with a plan basically to design an economic plan that is very prevalent in the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, like Denmark. There is a foolproof system that has been designed and it actually works for all the citizens. Is there not to say that obviously in an economy people shouldn't do well? Surely people should do well, but also the people that cannot do so well, you have to design a system that creates some sort of I will say a system that can emancipate people for social mobility to grow, so that if there was somebody say 10 years ago, they will reach a point 10 years later, and their status, their economic status would have improved a lot, i.e. in terms of their education, in terms of their access to cultural activities, access to just exploring the nation and having a better standard of living. So that is my advocate, and that involves putting in money, putting in resources to design these things. I remember years ago when you had the career service where you could have an appointment to go and see somebody face to face. That could help you if you were unemployed, what you wanted to do, and they effectively helping you to get by. We see these I don't know if it's job centers or whatever they call them. They're there. How effective they are, I do not know. And so you need to be putting something into the economy. That is what governance is all about. But what we see is every 4 years, we get to a point where people say, oh, this, or maybe every 8 years, we come to a point where we say, oh, Labour is so bad or Conservative is so bad, and we go and vote. And as soon as we finish our voting, we leave it to government to just carry on. Nobody does a follow up. Everybody is interested in running around just for their daily bread without really investing any time to find out what is being done. What are these governments doing for us? What are the ways to bring them to account? And so I make that analogy, which is a bit like you take a child to the school and then you take them day one, check everything is okay, they are in the school, and then you leave them there without any follow up, without any checking up on them, without checking on their progress, checking on how they are doing in the school, and just sit back and think that maybe when you come back 10 years, these pupil or kids that you left in the school would have done so well. This is what we are really doing in our economy, because people do not want to know anything that involves our politics or anything involving decision making. We don't want to know. We leave it. As soon as we finish voting, we think that's enough, and we leave it. And in reality, that is not enough. We need to be engaging in a conversation. People need to show interest. There have to be some empathy, and so that we don't end up complaining and complaining, but basically come up with actions, or just to even let people in power know that the people are watching, the people are talking, the people are engaging, to basically help them to be in a way a check and balance. Because if the press are not doing their work, then really the people should be doing that work. And so that's the analogy which I am making, and I think that people should make that effort to engage in the conversation. And so this is why I want to engage you in this Brexit or Brexin, because we've seen that there has been an extreme level of waste of limited national resources, i.e., in terms of financial, legal resources, and human resources. The national divide, that debate, it is totally unnecessary. Now that we know where we are in 10 years, we find that these things were indeed not necessary. The nation shouldn't have involved, even have called for that. There was no need. But then we could have designed systems if it was to do with immigration, which I am going to talk about. I have gotten some net migration figures to basically have some comparative analysis to find out indeed have we improved in net migration since Brexit, or is net migration still up? We're going to see all that here. So these are the issues that I personally think that we should be engaging in. We should be checking what is going on. We should be having that conversation. So if we go back to the position of Brexit, basically activating it in January 2021, up until today, where we find that the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, rightfully taking the nation back into Europe. The analogy, once again, that I make is a bit like two parties, well, basically married couple that have had a bitter divorce, albeit a divorce that has been ongoing for years and has caused them a great deal in legal cost, in all sort of resources, disagreements, unhappiness, toxic atmosphere. And at the end of that divorce, they then come back to cohabit. So this is where really we are. So we've done all these wasteful, disagreeing activities, spending so much, wasting our time when we should be using that time to develop the nation and to improve in the lives and in the cost of living of that particular nation. We have engaged all the resources in these things. Many a times we see that when it comes to us maybe investing in social amenities, in investing in communities, doing all the positive things that can help, basically, how should I term it? Just to raise the leveling up, just as Michael Gove was put in charge, leveling up, developing the areas that are underdeveloped in the country. The message that you always get is that there isn't adequate resources. However, you see a great deal of resources that has been wasted so much into this Brexit issue, this Brexit debate. And so the conversation that we are having here today is going to touch on a few things. One is net migration. We're going to look at net migration to see that indeed has there been any sort of improvement, because net migration was one of the big Brexit selling points. Then we are also going to look at something like the ECHR, European ECHR, basically to European Commission on Human Rights. We are going to look at that European Convention on Human Rights. We're going to look at that to see where we are, because there has been that call, I think, coming up to the end of that last Tory government. There was the call that we should totally disengage from the ECHR. I think Suella Braverman was one of the key people, and we also see the head of the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch, who has also advocated for us to basically disengage or exit the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights. We are going to see where we are on that. Then we look at EU/UK defense, considering the issues that has gone on in this past few months concerning the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky going to the White House and all the controversies that happened when he was there, and how America wants Europe to take full control in their, basically increase their budget expenditure in NATO to basically manage their own European security against the threats from Russia. So we are going to see how Britain are basically involved in that. Then we also look at students, EU student visa, basically for a visa deal for the youth to basically live and work in Europe. So we're going to look at all these various aspects to see where we are and to see how was it necessary? Was it indeed necessary for us to disengage with Europe basically on Brexit, only to find ourselves that 9 years later, we are basically pushing everything to get back into the same position where we were before. And so I will start off looking at net migration. So what we find is that come sort of March 2015, the UK net migration was obviously it was positive. And according to data from the Migration Observatory as of 2024, we found out that the EU were probably thereabout, I would say 59 to 77% of net migration. The source of it was from the EU. That is when we had that free movement of people from the European Union. Basically, not just when we say it, most of the time we say it in such a way as if that it is only a one-way traffic, but it wasn't. It was a free movement that allowed British people to go into Europe as well as other people coming into Britain. But we know that come March 2015, I think the access that Bulgarians and Romanians had gained into the UK labor market, and the number of probably the Romanian and Bulgarians that were coming into the country may have probably been one of the factors that were used by people like my own local MP Nigel Farage and most Brexiteers to argue for the country to sign up for Brexit. And so that actually happened. And so people were of the opinion that now Britain is going to gain control of its borders, and therefore net migration was going to drop drastically. So this is what we were sold by the then Tory government. So we see that from 2019 to 2024, that has not been indeed the case. So the figure that comes up as of June 2024 for net migration, it was positive. So that means that regardless of the Brexit, the number of people that were coming into the country when it's netted off, i.e. British people going elsewhere and other people coming in, the net, it was a positive of 728,000 people. And so you see that for a starter, the main argument that was used for the Brexit does not really hold, because it was not negative, it's actually a positive. But then what we see is that it is actually positive because people from non-European, non-EU countries are actually now making a bulk of that number. And obviously, they're mostly using the work stroke study route. So we all know about the skilled worker scheme, which was a bit of a scheme. I did talk about it in my previous videos, that people came in from Nigeria, Ghana, elsewhere, maybe South American countries, and in effect they came to suffer, in the sense that the cost of living annually in the UK, you need to have a minimum of about 16 to 17,000 pounds just to have a subsistence living. And so they found out that the incomes that they were commanding and the cost that they had put into coming into this country, their surcharges that they had to pay for their use of the NHS if they did, and so many other hidden expenditure that they did not anticipate. makes it almost impossible for them to profit in any way for that skilled worker scheme endeavor. And so, probably at this stage, the message is gone out there, and this thing is almost died out. Nobody is coming in. But obviously, we are seeing that the 728,000 is actually a UK sort of work and study scheme, which mainly probably we have a great deal, a great number of inflow, maybe from India, from Pakistan. We also have a scheme for South Koreans, for Uruguay, for New Zealand, Canada, and all these other countries. But surely they are having some sort of a quota to control this scheme. But in reality, the migration thing that was used for the argument for Brexit as we see now is a non-starter. It didn't really work. If we do go back to look at the projection, it is projected that come 2028, the net migration, UK net migration, will fall to about 315,000 as compared to the 728,000, which will be a drop of probably almost like half of it will be gone, almost like 50% drop. But then the reality is that according to the Migration Observatory, all the projections that they've made in the past 20 years, it is always underestimated. So they will project it like that, but in reality, when the time comes, you tend to find out that this 315,000 that they projected for 2028 may not necessarily be the case. It may be a lot higher, which makes the whole thing a non-starter. When we conclude, I will put, I'll just basically run through some data, some graphs, so that you can get an idea of where we are with net migration in the UK and the projection, and then also to compare it to other countries, other developed countries in the world, just to see if we are doing anything unique. The reality is that from what I've seen, we are not doing anything unique, and we are not even the country with the highest inflow of migrants. So then we go to the next thing, which is the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights. So obviously with the Brexit, there was also the talk about us taking control of our laws, of our judiciary systems. And once again, in the previous conversation, I've always mentioned the issue with when Rishi Sunak used the parliamentary supremacy to overrule the judicial independence, even in the UK Supreme Court. So you tend to find out that just as we come off Brexit and then take power from Strasbourg, we realize that that power that we took didn't necessarily come into the hands of the Supreme Court. That power was used to play politics once again, because Sunak could have exercised restraint when the Supreme Court ruled that Rwanda was indeed not a safe country. From the research that they had had, obviously we know that Israel in the past had used Rwanda in the same way, whereby the people that were sent there were subsequently sent back to their own countries. This I got to know when I was doing my research on international human rights and economic law in Essex University, because I did something, a paper on the African courts on human and people's rights. And in that research, got to know that Rwanda was indeed not as safe as people thought it was. I also discovered there was a lady, Omhoza, who had also maybe challenged Paul Kagame, and she had been put away since 2010, and she had not even seen her family. The case that was brought to the African Court on Human and People's Rights basically ended up, Rwanda basically took themselves out of the African Court on human and people's rights so that they didn't have to be subjected to their ruling. So we see that the ECHR, which is a good thing for all the citizens here in the United Kingdom, in the sense that it creates an avenue whereby if you feel that you have not had justice domestically for one reason or the other, and you want to seek justice in a higher court, say in Strasbourg, then you could exercise that ECHR rights. Albeit these things are not easy, because if you just a basic domestic issue to go through the court processes, even at a lower court like a magistrate court, these are frightening things for the ordinary person, let alone taking things to the UK Supreme Court. And then if you're not satisfied, then you go to the ECHR. There are hurdles and there are, requirements to meet in order for you to get to that level. But at least it is good for the citizen to have that avenue or that room to extend their case, need it be, if they have the resources and the strength to fight their case. And so here we see Sir Keir Starmer ahead of this EU UK summit that is due on the 19th of May. We see that seems to be a very nice relationship between the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, and the President of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen. The relationship seems to be very cordial and very mutual. In my opinion, it is a good thing because I am totally, if assuming that we had an overwhelming vote of say 65% to 35% on the Brexit, then that would have been deemed that the whole nation indeed wanted this kind of a thing. But the 51.8 and 48.2 surely is not good enough. And so it is rightful that we see that communication, that cordial relationship between the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the head of the European Commission getting back together, working together, and with Britain showing positive signs, because I know that Keir Starmer may have some degree of opposition amongst even his own Labour MPs and also the Tories that are totally against us honouring the ECHR. But surely it is a great thing that the UK Prime Minister is doing. It is a tragedy that we are having to waste so much resources, human, and also the disagreements, the divisions amongst the people of this nation, only to find ourselves back in the EU. So we hope that whatever it is that they are discussing concerning the ECHR, that the Prime Minister stays firm and do the right thing for the nation, because as I always say, it's not about what you're saying, it's what you're doing. So if the Prime Minister is doing this, then indeed he is indeed considering the rights of the citizens of the United Kingdom in a positive way. So that is a good thing. Then the next thing we look at, in view of the threats from Russia and the issue with Ukraine and the stance that Donald Trump is taking, i.e. urging European Union leaders to basically increase their budget and have their own plan. And this 2030 security agenda for the European Union, we see the European Defence Fund, which is about 150 billion pounds. So that is also an issue on the agenda for the summit that is due on the 19th of May, that they are going to be discussing this. Obviously, the ECHR issue was more of a bit of a leakage of information that came out that is where the British Premier is heading to. But the European defense deal, which is £150 billion deal, allows UK firms to basically access that fund to sell, apparently so, weapons to EU countries. Could be well, Ukraine is not an EU country as it stands, but it could be that they sell it there and then these things find themselves back in Ukraine and supporting them with the war. And so, for British firms to access that fund, it is conditional that they also have to allow European fishermen access into British waters. So that is the deal. It is a deal, it's an exchange. You give me this, I give you that. And so this is also something that is also on the agenda, which is surely going to take effect because the British Prime Minister is definitely working on this deal to allow British firms to access this European Development Fund of £150 billion in exchange for concessions on in British fishing waters. So that as well, you're gonna get a bit of a pushback from you know Brexiteers are going to be feeling betrayed for us allowing this access. So that is also another issue in the pipeline. Then what we have here, probably the last issue to talk about, is to do with the youth visa deal. So there is also that talk, for the youth, basically age 18 to 30, to have an opportunity to work and to study in mainland Europe. So this is not sort of a back to the back to the free movement as we used to have when we were members of the EU, but it's just a much cordial relationship between the EU and Britain to allow, basically, to make it a lot more flexible for 18 to 30-year-olds to have that experience to basically go into any European country to work and to experience a different culture, to also gain some education. But this is on a time a visa that is time limited, so there is a limitation on the time that one could spend there, and also there are going to be caps. But all these things are going to be a lot clearer once once the summit is completed. That is where all the discussions are going to complete. But from where we stand today and from what we see, the relationship seems fairly cordial. So the point here is that I want to engage you in the conversation. If you are a Brexiteer, what are you thinking? Do you feel betrayed? Do you think that it was probably a good thing, this 51.8 to 48.2 vote? Was it sufficient? Was it adequate enough for us to go Brexit, to cause the divide? Has it been a good thing since we have gone Brexit, i.e., in the cost of living? Do you feel a lot wealthier? Do you feel that our gaining access to our basic, or gaining full control of our legal and judiciary powers has been used in a way that is very positive to you? Do you also think Um, do you think that with us going Brexit, your life has improved a lot in any way? Do you feel richer by the decisions that has been taken? Do you feel that there is less migration? Um, do you think that it is a good idea for this nation to stand in isolation amid the developments in the world? Do you think that it has been such a good idea for us to basically block access for the neighbors that are a lot nearer to this nation, and taking people from distant cultures? Do you think these things are positive? Let us know. So, for example, if we look at net migration as of 2024, in as much as it's actually gone up to 728,000, the net migration from the from EU into Britain is actually, that one is a negative. It's minus 95,000. So there has been a net negative effect, i.e., meaning that there are more British people going into Europe, i.e., for migration reasons, than EU people coming into Britain since 2021. And so we want to engage you in that conversation. Let us know what you think. If you think you have alternative arguments that are better than what has been expressed here, I am very happy to hear what you have to say. Let us know your opinion. Let us engage in this conversation. Let us spend time out of our busy lives. Let us make time, as hard as it may be, to basically make our politicians responsible, to let them know that we are there, we are watching. We want to see if their actions are indeed in favor of what they promised that they were going to do. And so, yes, in concluding this video, I will basically go through some graphs, and then we can just, look at some comparative analysis of data from the Migration Observatory. So we see here some net migration figures. It's a global comparison by the Migration Observatory. This is data, I think, going up to 2023, and the data compiled by the OECD. And so we see here, you can see the United Kingdom in the lighter blue. So you can see the net migration here is 15%. And we see Luxembourg with the 51% on the far right being the highest. And we see Mexico being 1%, being the lowest, Japan 2%, Poland 2%, Turkey. And so you find that, let's look at places like Germany, 18%, Estonia, 18%, Norway, 18%, even Spain, 17%, Netherlands, 16%, Slovenia, 15% as the UK, United States, 15%, France is lower at 14%, Denmark, 12%, Italy, 11%. So these, there is nothing really abnormal about the position of the United Kingdom in all this. But I will go further down to see if there is any other data that we can look at. Yeah. So you can see estimates of net migration and immigration to the UK year ending December 1991 to end in June 2024. So once again, we see here, we see some peak areas nearly in sort of 2003, 2007. Then it goes up. 2019, we're looking at about, say, It's something in the region of 300,000. But then we see this other rise, the purple one. This, let's have a look at the first one here. We see net migration, and then we got British citizens. Let me have a look if I can get any better interpretation of this. So we see net migration there. I'm kind of struggling to understand what this sort of light purple, the light purple thing that has shot up since 2021. So this could be net migration after Brexit, because you see that after 2021 there was a dip in 2019. That would have been, obviously we voted in 2016, and whereby there's a lot of uncertainty. But then 2021 to 2023 we see a shot in the number, sort of heading up to the sort of 800,000s thereabout. It says experimental, but I'm not quite sure that is, because when I check the 2024 figure from, obviously from what we discussed before, it was 728,000. And so you see that this thing is really actually heading up. So we see here the source IPS base for 1991 to 2009, ONS table 2.0, long-term international migration time series, and for year December 2010 to year 2000 March 2020, provisional estimates of long-term international migration year ending March 2020. Experimental estimate, ONS long-term international migration provision year 2012 to 2023. Not very clear exactly what it is that is being communicated here. But this is the data that I do find rather interesting. So on this one, we see non-EU migration to the UK by reason, and year ending 2019 to year ending June 2024. So obviously we do get a lot of issues about asylum seekers and how they are flooding the UK and all that. But this data here, this graph gives it all away. And then you see that people have been attacking asylum seekers for no good reason. So we look at the line graphs and then we look at the various colors. So below it, as you can see, the orange one is to do with humanitarian reasons. So migration by humanitarian reasons. So it gives you, if you look on the left, it gives you the various quarters. So we start from 2019 second quarter, and it goes like that. And I think we end up in 2024 second quarter. So you see that for humanitarian reasons, you are seeing that something between 2022 first quarter and 2023 second quarter, that's when the reasons for humanitarian migration goes up a bit, but then it dives down come 2024 second quarter. But then we look at the more important one for asylum seekers. So you can see that it was very reasonably low, say 2019, very low. And it sort of goes up a little bit between 2021 and 2023 third quarter, but it's still nothing near this sort of alarming rate at which we make it seem. But in reality, where the real numbers are is to do with people coming into work. So you can see that the light purple line is the migration for work, which turns out to be the highest as at the end of 2024 second quarter. You see that that's actually the highest. Then you have the one coming in to study. So you see that in reality, these numbers really shoots up from 2021 first quarter to 2024 second quarter. The net migration coming into the UK to study and to work is the one that indeed really shoots up. And so this is for the people that have been making a lot of noise against asylum seekers. This data gives it all away. So in effect, our net migration is not from asylum seekers. So we see that based on this graph, these higher numbers, you can see that is a drastic rise. So this is what is actually probably making that 728,000, that is shooting it up from that sort of round about 320,000 in sort of 2021 and come up to 2024. So these are the numbers that are going up. One will argue also that if that is the case, the nation is probably benefiting a lot from these people coming in, because they will be paying very high school tuition fees, accommodation fees, blah 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 blah. And so then you see that really there isn't really as much a problem as we make it look. And then we have the long-term international migration provision 2012 to 2024. Figures are experimental and rely on ONS, Office for National Statistics assumptions. Humanitarian comparison arise under bespoke routes for Ukrainians and Hong Kong British nationals, status holders, as well as other small humanitarian routes. So you see that in reality, a lot of the migration is also actually coming from Ukraine, for obviously on the humanitarian side, and also people that are from the former Hong Kong British territory, which is now back in the hands of the Chinese government. Obviously, back in the day, it was Chris Patten who was the governor. Chris Patten, I think he was a Tory MP and probably a cabinet minister who was sent to Hong Kong in 1997 to 2007. So what do we have here? Share of former non-EU students switching to UK visas by the end of first year after arrival. So we see also the people that are switching. So they come in as students and then switch their visas to working visas. So once again, you can see the graduate visas, which is in the light blue. So they come in to study and then they switch it. Then you also see the skilled worker route. You can see that goes up 2%, 8%, 11% from 2020 to 2022. So, you can analyze this data yourself and make up whatever story you want to make up. But the data is there to prove to you that probably the noise that we are making about asylum seekers, we need to be a little bit restrained in what we're saying without really looking at what these real figures are. So we see here estimates of the net migration and migration of EU and non-EU citizens in the UK. So we see non-EU citizens, you can see that is shot up, is huge. These are, extensive. So you can see here, once again, the light purple is a non-EU IPS based. Then we have the EU IPS based, which sort of converges around about 2011. But then you see the non-European one, which kicks off in 2020. And by, say, 2023, the figure is huge. It's almost hitting that sort of probably like 1 million mark. So these are the things that people should be more concerned with rather than jumping on that bandwagon on asylum seekers, which was a big thing. In a way, it becomes a bit like a decoy where, Rishi Sunak was really pushing, I'm going to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, when in effect, the numbers are actually the students probably coming in from India, Pakistan, maybe Nigeria, Ghana, and all these places, rather than the asylum seekers. So here you are. We've explored a little bit of migration figures, and so Brexiteers, you can actually do your research to see if indeed this whole Brexit thing was working. I mean, if we've come to the realization that this thing has not benefited us as much as we anticipated it to be, there is no need for the nation to sit in that rot. There is the need to correct what has not been right. And so, in my opinion, I think that is what the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is actually doing